I stood by the fireplace on Christmas Eve, bourbon warming my hand, while 30 hungry strangers and my daughter-in-law's last name crowded my couches. Vanessa appeared at my elbow, face the color of old paper, whispering through a frozen smile, "Frank, where's the catered feast? They're starving." I felt something cold and satisfied flicker in my chest, but I kept my voice level and handed her one printed sheet of paper. "Management," I said, "is not responsible for your lies." By midnight, those guests would be ordering takeout on my lawn. To understand how I ended up shutting down a 30-person Christmas dinner in my own home, we have to look at the boundaries my daughter-in-law spent years trying to break. Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever been treated like an ATM or an unpaid servant inside your own home, the one who pays, cooks, and cleans while someone else takes the credit, I'm glad you found your way here. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments about the worst in-law hosting nightmare you've ever survived. For 30 years, I owned and ran a 40-room boutique bed and breakfast on the coast. I learned every number that matters in hospitality. How many pounds of turkey feed 30 people? How many chairs fit a room without breaking fire code? What a catered holiday dinner actually costs per head? And exactly how fast a house falls apart when guests treat it like a hotel they never paid for. I can look at a room and tell you its capacity, its cleanup time, and its true cost before you finish your sentence. When my wife Eleanor passed, I sold the business and built a spacious lake house with the proceeds. Not a showpiece, just a good, solid home with room to breathe and a porch she would have loved. I live modestly. Same truck, same flannel, receipts filed in the same cabinet I've used since 1994. My son David and his wife Vanessa live differently. They lease cars they can't afford, chase Instagram aesthetics, and treat every holiday like a content opportunity. To them, my lake house was never my sanctuary. It was an unmonetized asset, a free venue waiting for a brand. Vanessa would walk through my kitchen and say, "Frank, this space is basically begging for events," as if my home were a listing she hadn't gotten to yet. I felt my jaw tighten every time, but I'd just top up her coffee and change the subject. David looked at the floor. He always looked at the floor. When you run a hospitality business for 30 years, you learn to spot a freeloader immediately. Unfortunately, the hardest freeloaders to evict are the ones related to you by marriage. The first time it happened, it was a surprise wine weekend. Vanessa texted me on a Thursday that she and 6 friends would be arriving Friday evening. "Don't cook, we'll bring everything." What they brought was 2 bottles of wine and a charcuterie board. What I provided was my guest rooms, my lake view, my kitchen, and my entire Saturday. I spent the morning of their arrival setting out fresh linens, stocking the fridge, and folding towels like the live-in staff of a hotel I no longer owned. They left Sunday afternoon. The kitchen looked like a catering accident. Wine rings on the granite, a skillet soaking in the sink, a broken glass swept carelessly under the island. Not one of them offered to help. Not one said thank you. In my business, we had a saying, "A guest who never offers a hand isn't visiting, they're occupying." When I called David and told him, plainly, that his wife had treated my home like a free Airbnb and me like the maid, Vanessa picked up the phone instead. Her voice was, "Honey, we just love your home so much, Dad. It's about bringing people together in a beautiful space." It was a lovely sentence. It was also a sentence that cost me a day of cleaning and asked me to be grateful for the privilege. I felt a deep, boiling anger at being treated like a live-in maid, but I kept my voice perfectly level. I photographed the kitchen before touching a thing, hired a professional cleaning service, and handed David the $300 invoice with a short note attached. Never again. He paid it without argument. I believed that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next year, Vanessa kept volunteering my home for things I never agreed to. A baby shower for a friend of hers, a content day with her followers, a book club that somehow required a lake view. Each time I declined, she looked wounded and told people I was protective of the house, as if generosity were a flaw she was patiently curing me of. The line between family visit and free luxury venue kept blurring, and she kept her hand on the eraser. I thought making them pay the cleaning bill would establish a permanent boundary. But Vanessa wasn't looking for a weekend getaway. She was planning a hostile takeover. In mid-November, David called to say he and Vanessa would be coming to the lake house for Christmas. Just the 2 of them, he said. I was genuinely happy. For the first time since Eleanor died, I let myself picture a real holiday again. A quiet tree, a roast for three, my son in his old armchair. I planned the menu that same afternoon, the way I always did, with a pencil and a notepad. A week later, Vanessa called with an update, her tone light, as if she were mentioning the weather. Her parents' house was undergoing renovations, so she'd invited a few of her relatives to join us. "You have the room, Dad," she said. "It'll be fun." I felt a cold prickle at the word fun, but I asked, calmly, how many a few was. She laughed and told me not to worry about it. Over the next several days, the number arrived in pieces, each one delivered casually, as if quantity were a trivial detail. 8, then 14, then 22. By the 1st of December, it was 30, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a great-uncle I'd met exactly once, all expecting beds in my guest rooms or air mattresses across my living areas for 3 full days. I was perfectly capable of hosting large groups, but my professional instincts were screaming that there was a hidden agenda. My brother Ray, a retired accountant who'd spent 40 years auditing other people's excuses, listened to the whole thing and didn't hesitate. "Frank, she's not bringing family to visit you. She's moving them in and making you the staff. Shut it down. Today." He was right, and we both knew it. But I wanted to see my son for Christmas, and I knew exactly what refusing would produce. A family group chat in which I was the Grinch, the lonely old man guarding an empty house out of spite. Vanessa would write that story beautifully. She'd believe it too. I felt the old instinct to protect my home rise up, but I made a different choice. I would open my doors, but I would not act as an unpaid catering service for 30 strangers. Whatever she had planned, she would have to build it herself. I decided to let her play her game. But what Vanessa didn't realize was that she was playing against the house. 2 weeks before Christmas, the email arrived with a subject line that could have been written by my old events coordinator. "Christmas logistics and requirements, Christmas tree, 3 pages. I printed it, put on my reading glasses, and sat down with a red pen the way I used to review vendor contracts. Page 1 was a dietary list for 30 people. Organic produce only for gluten-free guests, 3 vegan, 1 who avoided nightshades, and children who would eat brand-name items only. Page 2 instructed me on how to decorate each guest room and specified linen thread counts. Page 3 asked me to hire a bartender for Christmas Eve, someone presentable, and to stock a top-shelf bar. In my head, the numbers assembled themselves automatically the way they always did. Organic catering for 30 over 3 days, roughly $4,000. A top-shelf bar and a hired bartender, another $1,200. Linens, decor, and the labor of a 67-year-old man on his feet for 72 hours. Priceless, as they say, which is just another way of saying nobody intended to pay for it. Nowhere in those 3 pages was the word please, and nowhere was an offer to cover a single line item. It was a purchase order. I was simply the supplier who hadn't been told he'd be paid. I'd received demanding emails before in my business. Every one of them had come from someone who was paying me. That was the entire difference, and it was a difference Vanessa could not see. I called her that afternoon and kept it level. I would welcome David and her for Christmas. I was not funding, staffing, or catering a party for 30 relatives I barely knew. If she wanted organic everything and a hired bartender, she was welcome to book a venue and write the check herself. Vanessa didn't blink. Her voice went soft and disappointed, the tone she used when she wanted witnesses to feel sorry for her. "You have this massive, empty house, Dad. Family opens their doors to family. It would be incredibly selfish of you to make my relatives pay for a hotel when you have the space, the money, and nothing but free time. Massive, therefore hers. Funded, therefore spendable. Retired, therefore free. In 30 years of hospitality, I'd met plenty of people who believed a room was theirs simply because they wanted it. The difference was they'd been strangers, and I'd been able to hand them an invoice." I let her finish. I said, "I hear you," in the same calm voice I'd used to decline 1,000 unreasonable booking requests, and I ended the call without raising it once. I felt my jaw tighten at being called selfish in my own home. I hung up the phone, walked into my home office, and decided to do a little research. That evening, I sat in my home office with my reading glasses and my iPad, and I did what I'd done 1,000 times when a booking didn't add up. I went looking for the public listing. Vanessa had never made her event private. There it was on Facebook, titled Vanessa's Luxury Country Christmas Retreat, with a cover photo of my lake taken from my own dock. 30 people marked going. I scrolled slowly, the way you read a contract you suspect. In the pinned post, she laid out the terms. A $100 all-inclusive hosting fee per guest, covering lodging, meals, and a full holiday experience. 30 guests, $3,000, collected through a payment link, deposited into her account. Then I found the comments. A cousin asked who would possibly be cooking for 30 people. Vanessa's reply was waiting, cheerful and certain. Don't worry about a thing. My father-in-law's staff will be handling all the cooking, cleaning, and bartending. You just show up and enjoy. Staff. I have no staff. I have a 67-year-old man with a bad knee and a receipt cabinet. She had sold 30 people a luxury retreat staffed by a ghost workforce, and the ghost was me. I felt the floor drop out from under me, but I didn't rage. I took screenshots of every post, every comment, every payment confirmation her relatives had proudly shared, and filed them the way I'd filed evidence for a disputed invoice. Then I closed the iPad and sat in the dark for a long time. She wasn't just using my house for a family gathering. She had turned my home into her own personal, unlicensed, zero-overhead business. On December 23rd, with her vans presumably already loaded, Vanessa called one final time for what she clearly considered a management check-in. She wanted confirmation that the Wagyu beef roast she demanded was ordered. She reminded me twice that her parents had high standards. Then came the warning, delivered with the bright, brittle cheer of someone who has never once been told no. I was not to embarrass her, not to act grumpy, not to look cheap in front of her family. Just stay in the background and keep the food coming, Dad. I promised them a 5-star experience, and I expect you to deliver. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, just the cold clarity of a man who has already read the final page. The screenshots were printed. The invoice was drafted, itemized, and waiting in my home office. Her 5-star experience was fully accounted for. I just hadn't told her who would be paying for it. If your in-laws tried to charge people to stay in your house, would you have canceled the trip? Or would you have let them show up? Tell me in the comments. I gave her the exact answer a good hospitality manager gives. I will ensure your guests get exactly what you paid for. I did not cancel the trip. Canceling would have handed her the story she'd already written. The Grinch, the empty house, the ruined Christmas, and I never give a person their own script. Instead, I prepared the house the way I used to prepare for a checkout morning. Beautifully and exactly on my terms. I locked my private wing. I locked the wine cellar Eleanor, and I had spent 30 years building. I locked the deep freezers where the good roasts actually lived. Then I dressed the living room like a wedding reception. Every chair angled toward a roaring fire, the tall tree lit, the good silver tray polished and set on the hall table by the front door. What I did not set out was food. No Wagyu roast, no organic spread, no bartender in a pressed vest, no catered feast of any kind. A room can look like a 5-star venue and still contain nothing but firelight and a lesson. On the silver tray, I stacked 2 things. Printed copies of her Facebook event page. The listing, the $100 fee, her own comments promising staff, and a stack of customized welcome invoices, one per paying guest, itemizing exactly what she had collected and exactly what I had agreed to provide. A warm room, a fire, a seat. Balance due from me, 0. I felt a quiet grief that it had come to this in my own home on Christmas Eve, but I slept well. In hospitality, you learn that the cruelest thing you can do to a bad contract is honor it to the letter. The venue was perfectly prepared. All I had to do was wait for the guests to arrive and realize there was no kitchen staff. They arrived at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Right on the schedule, she'd emailed me. 2 rented vans, a sedan, and 30 people carrying suitcases past my threshold as if it were a check-in desk. Vanessa led the procession in a cream-colored coat, arms wide, loudly welcoming her family to the retreat she'd promised them. "Make yourselves at home," she called, gesturing at my fire, my tree, my house, as if she held the deed. "The bar opens at 6, and dinner is served at 7. I stood by the fireplace with a bourbon and watched her sell a property she didn't own. By 5, the question started. Where was the bartender? By 6, louder. Where was the food? Her mother asked about the Wagyu roast. A cousin asked about the vegan spread. Vanessa kept smiling and saying, any minute now, while her eyes hunted for me. At 20 past 6, she appeared at my elbow, face the color of old paper, and whispered through frozen teeth. Frank, where is the catered feast? They're starving. I handed her the single printed sheet I'd prepared. Her own event page, her own fee, her own promise of staff. Management, I said quietly, is not responsible for your lies. Then, instead of letting her drag me into the kitchen for a private war, I walked to the center of the room and tapped a glass with a fork. The room went still. I welcomed them warmly, truly warmly, because they were guests, and a guest is a guest. Then I picked up the silver tray and offered it to her father first. The Facebook listing, the $100 fee, the comments, and a welcome invoice itemizing exactly what I had agreed to provide. A roof, a fire, a seat. I'm delighted to host you all, I said. But I was never hired to cater. Your daughter collected $3,000 for a 5-star experience. I'd suggest asking her for a refund. There's an excellent pizza place 9 miles up the road. Vanessa's mask didn't crack. It shattered. Her own aunt was already holding an invoice, reading it aloud. As Vanessa's father began demanding to know where their money went, I quietly retreated to my locked wing, poured myself a bourbon, and let them handle their own family business. Behind my locked wing door, I heard it unfold the way a billing dispute settles when the guest finally realizes the charge was never authorized. Her father's voice, low and dangerous. Her aunt, louder. Then the sound that ends every con. The transfer. Vanessa refunded the full $3,000 on the spot, phone in hand, while her own family watched her do it. Half of them left that night, vans pulling out of my drive toward whatever hotel would take 30 people on Christmas Eve. The rest slept hungry on my couches and air mattresses, silent, glaring at the woman who had sold them a feast that didn't exist. David and Vanessa left after breakfast without meeting my eyes. In the weeks that followed, David apologized often and quietly went low contact with her family out of sheer embarrassment. Vanessa's name came off my guest list for good. The lock code changed, the new house rule written in my own careful hand. As for me, I spent the rest of that winter exactly as I'd meant to before she ever arrived, alone, unhurried, at peace. She tried to use my home to buy the admiration of her family, but she ended up bankrupting her own reputation. Here's what 30 years behind a front desk taught me. Generosity is a gift, but entitlement is a thief. When someone tries to turn your kindness into a business, it is your absolute right to shut down their operation. If this story found you at the right time, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, how do you protect your home and your peace during the holidays?